Welcome to the Revolution Church podcast.
It's my normal rant when I give a talk that I can't ever tell if the audio's working. So, hey Vicky, how's it going? I'm sure this will be said a few times, but I'm speaking today because it's winter break, and so Milo was home all week, and Jay couldn't record his talk nor do it live. So here I am. I'm usually not very smart when I give a talk, and I drink carbonated beverage like a seltzer because I love seltzer. So I have my seltzer, and then I have like some caffeine. So I'm doubling down on my carbonation for giving a talk. So that's a smart move. So hey Zoe, I had I'll do it now because it doesn't really super pertain to the talk. So Zoe, one talk I gave, I said how I felt that the natural state of humans was like pretty crappy, right? That we're just bad from the jump. That's kind of what I thought. And you brought up that maybe it was more outside influences and everything. And I said, "Oh, I'll have to think on that." And then it occurred to me when Jay gave his last talk on Galatians 4 that the, um the people of Galatia, they are warriors by nature, right? That's what Jay was saying, that they're warriors. And then we learn in Galatians 4 that they cared for Paul when he was sick, right? And so that really made me start thinking like, oh, if Paul is how they heard, quote unquote, the good news, and they accepted him as warriors who, like, warriors fight, but they saw a sick person and accepted them in before receiving the good news. Like, I was like, oh, wait a second. This is throwing a hiccup into my whole thing because you have like, um, these like fighters that have not heard like any sort of good news, um, doing like for taking care of the least of these, and so I was like, oh well, I have a feeling that Zoe was more correct on this than I was. um so that's my long-winded thing, that maybe I'm changing my mind. Winter break blues. Hey Jay. Yeah, yeah, I was filling them in, Jay, that you're full-time dadding this week, with the kiddos off winter break. Does see, when I say it, it's straight Long Island, right? Else, if I said yo dog, DAWG, yo dog. So if you have me walking a dog by the water, oh boy, oh boy, drinking a coffee, ooh, that's a whole lot of Long Island accent that you're getting right there. Walk the dog by the water, drinking a tall coffee in a small town. All the accents coming out. And then if anyone thinks that my Long Island accent's bad, my mom's is even worse, which is funny. Like, my mom's is what we make fun of, like when she says dog. Dog. All you dog people. So I guess we could start to get started. So I had some ideas rattling around in my brain, gearing up for a new talk. And that's kind of, I've explained before, that's kind of what happens. I used a pinball analogy where, you unlock the multi-ball, and so you have all these balls rolling around and you're just trying to keep them in play until something happens. and so I was starting to get like ideas for a talk, and I was like, okay, all right, we're getting there. And so when Jay asked if I could fill in this week, I was like, yeah, sure. It's not a problem. And then after he asked, my weekend, like end of the weekend got like completely booked up. So I was like starting to panic, like, oh, I need time to really isolate and think about the talk I want to give. And then everything that happened with Russia and Ukraine really messed up my mind, and I was just like not able to focus. So last night I was very frustrated trying to come up with like organizing my ideas. I was pretty frustrated, and even my wife was having to say like, "Hey, you really like doing this, so don't let it frustrate you." And I really do. I absolutely love doing this. So that was like, okay, okay. And so what I what I ended up having to do is just go, all right, so what do I want to talk about? I made all, again, sorry for people on podcast that you're not seeing the visuals of this. Like I wrote all these crazy notes, right? And then I take that and I go like, all right, let's boil this down. What do I want to say? Um like what's really in my mind and in my heart? Like what do I want to say? And I came up with these three things. One is that we're all the same in the ways that count. The only ways that matter, we're all the same. Two is that division is bad and it's hurting us, which is very self-explanatory, but we'll go into it more. And then as always, legalism and the law, like where it pertains to the Bible and how literal we take it, hurts us tremendously. So I was like, all right, I gotta focus. And so now I start pulling in all my ideas and see what we where we get to. Oh, Chris in the chat said they don't even notice my accent because she's a Philly girl, so I hear New York accent a lot. Well, Chris, the only reason I read that out loud is because I'll be quoting a Philadelphia band a few times in this talk. So, rock on Philly. So, um, my first thought of we're all the same. I think it's an important lesson, and it's incredibly vital for our ability to practice grace. Um, and the first time that I ever heard of this concept was from a Philadelphia based band named Me Without You. And they were my favorite band for the longest time, and now they're still probably, I don't know, top three favorite bands. But I get into these like manic, kind of depressive states where I get obsessed with stuff, and then Me Without You fell victim to that, and I played it on end for like years. And so now I'm kind of like, all right, I let them rest on the shelf for a little bit. But and so Me Without You has a song called Cattail Down. And um the story is just about the lead singer and I guess his brother just like hopping trains going around the country, just wandering. And but they have towards the end of the song, it's kind of like in the movie Stand By Me, he comes face to face with a deer, and in looking at the deer, he comes to this great like realization where it's a he says, "You think you know who you are, but you're not you. You're everyone else." And then repeats, "You're everyone else" like 27 times. It just repeats over and over and over. And so that really kind of got me thinking. Like I really that was an intriguing concept to me. And Me Without You played around with this a similar concept with the notion of like we don't exist, only God exists. Like where um just like kind of like it's self-explanatory, so I don't know why I'm trying to explain it. But just like no, like we shouldn't focus on ourselves, only focus on God. So we don't exist. Only God exists, and so this kind of took that a step forward and saying that not only do we not exist, but we're not even ourselves. We're everybody else. And this is, as we know, a concept that Paul uses in Galatians, where it's there's no Jew nor Gentile, slave nor free, and this is a principle that Paul and we'll even see the Peter picked up from Jesus in the lessons of like the Good Samaritan, and when he was saying when you help the sick and the homeless and the poor, you help me. And you're like, oh, when did we ever do any, like when did we help you, when did we see you poor and hurt? And Jesus said, whatever you do to the least of these people, you do to me, you do for me. And so that kind of takes all the division out there, right? Like everyone's looking to Jesus as a different symbol. He, to some people at that time, he was the savior. At some to some people he was, a very important priest, some people a prophet, some all of the above. Some people he was just a kind of, they perceived him as a radical kind of zealot type person that's going to come and help them physically overthrow Rome and get their land back. And so what he's saying is like, you guys see me all as this, but I'm no different than, the people laying in the streets and the man that's beaten on his journey and that the Good Samaritan takes in. Like, there's no, I'm not any better than them, and you're not either, because we are the same. There's no Jew nor Gentile, and so on and so forth. And then, so exploring this concept took me a lot to the book of Acts, the book of Acts, and also Romans. Um, that those were the main places that I'll be pulling stuff from today. In terms of the Bible, I'll be quoting songs and uh, some American monks. So it's gonna be a wild ride, but it'll be good. And so, in Acts 15, um, Peter there's a big council meeting because they're having issues discussing the idea of Gentile um, believers, and whether they should like get circumcised and be like have to follow the law now that they're believers. And so there's kind of like a big council that they have, and Peter's there with other apostles. Paul's there. I think Paul and Barnabas go there. And Peter says, God, who knows the thoughts of everyone, accepted them. He shows this to us by giving them the Holy Spirit, just as he did to us. To God, those people are not different from us. So that's right. There's no difference between people. That's not a division that God makes. That's a division that only we make. So when it matters, the only way it matters is there's no division there. And Jesus lived this by hanging out with all these people that hated each other, tax collectors and the zealots that wanted to kill Romans and tax collectors. We have the priests, we have prostitutes, and Jesus is hanging out with them all equally, not to make any sort of point, not to correct their behavior, just to love them for the sake of loving them, because we're all the same. And it was tricky trying to come up with this idea, because ever since that movie, okay, so I will talk to you later. Thank you for stopping by. Um, so ever since the movie Fight Club came out, that's where we kind of start to get the phrase, you're not a unique individual snowflake. And I was going to play off of that, except for snowflake has such a heavy negative connotation now due to political use of it. So I was trying to find a way around it, and I was kind of thinking of um, maybe sunsets, like how to try to explain that. each sunset is unique and different and beautiful, but at the same time, they're all still sunsets. They're still the same thing, even though there's like finer details in it. And then I remembered this song by this band called Listener, and the song's called Wooden Hearts, and I love it. It's a like spoken word rock and roll. My wife hates it, but I love it. and and in the song Wooden Hearts, the singer makes an image of everybody being a shipwreck, and that the church is kind of just a group of shipwrecks all together. And then that was like, oh, that's exactly the imagery that I was looking for, and I'm glad that it like came back to my mind, because we're all equal. We're all shipwrecks, right? It doesn't matter if someone's a yacht and someone's a dinghy, someone's a canoe and someone's a motorboat. Like we're at. It doesn't matter how we like where we came from. Like we're all shipwrecks, but we're all shipwrecks together, and I think that's very important. And so when we start to see each other as this, as equals, as the same, and we're all just shipwrecks trying to come together and heal, um, then you start to wonder, like, why are we divided then? If we're all the same, like, why are we always dividing each other? Why, when in it obviously politically into parties, and then in each party there's division of how much to one way. Kelly asked, "Is that like when Augustine said the church was a hospital?" I would assume so. I do have a quote from Augustine coming up, but it would be very much like that. Where we're all like this patients in a hospital. We're all shipwrecks. We're all we're all having those same struggles. And so if we're the same, like, why do we have this need to divide ourselves? We'll do it with sports teams. We'll do it with, like I said, with political parties. So it's like right and left. But then the left has, oh, you're like super left. I'm central left. And they're right leaning left. And then the right has, oh, they're center right. They're right, they're left right. And then so it's like, it's just division upon division upon division upon division. And it's so there is this like human tendency to divide for some reason, and I think that is partially our we thrive off of the feeling of exclusivity, and that's why with Christianity that is often the main focus that churches and Christians have, is the exclusivity of Christianity rather than the grace and loving everybody aspect of it. And so we think about, when I think about this division, um I think about the ocean, right? And this is something that I Jesus gives an analogy on, and then I um read it in more detail from an a Sufi Islamic mystic, where they talk about the ocean contains fish, right? That's what it does. The ocean holds all the fish equally. It does not have divisions of fish. It just holds them all. And then if you were to cast a net into the ocean and you scoop out the net just holds fish. It doesn't divide the fish at all. It's only us that, based off our own reasoning and preferences and upbringing and knowledge, start to divide the fish into, this is good, this is not good, this is a trout, this is a bass, this is a pike, this is a walleye, this is a shark. And but the ocean doesn't care. It's all fish to the oceans. And then, like, something funny that occurred to me is, I'm sure even in this analogy where I'm saying that the ocean just holds fish, that's what it does. Somebody's probably thinking like, oh, but what about the mammals in the ocean? But it's like, exactly, that's exactly my point, is that we felt the need to find a division in the ocean just holding everything without dividing. We're like, oh, but there's also mammals in that too. But that's us doing that. That's not the ocean doing that. And but that's the divisions. Even in that analogy with the fisherman dividing it, the fisherman's dividing it based off of their knowledge and factors that they've learned, and um my my family just recently got a pool table. We had it for a while. My mom had it for a while, and then it got taken down due to lack of room in the house. And then they um, used part of the garage and they assembled it again. And I love pool. I've played it all. It was like my passion. It was like the Bible and pool growing up was my passion, from age like 15 to maybe um 18 or 19. I played pool at least 3 times a day for hours at a time. I meant 3 times a week for hours at a time, every week. And so I was very good and proficient, and I studied it and I practiced. Um and the reason I say that is because they got the pool table assembled, and they got these fancy looking pool balls with like kind of swirls, and they look really neat, and they're excited about them and they're cool. And as soon as I pick one up to look at it and see, I was like, oh, these are light. They're lighter pool balls than your standard pool ball. And but they had no idea. But I did, because of my experience and knowledge that I was bringing with me. I could just tell by how it felt that it was light. And when I watch a movie or a TV show where they're playing pool, I know how the balls that they're using will play and roll. But that's all from experience that I'm bringing. And since they didn't have that experience that I did, it's they didn't see that division between pool balls the way that I did. And but another thing that happened in my journey of playing and learning to play pool is the owner of the pool hall that I was going to. I was brave one day as like a 15-year-old kid, and I walked up to him and I asked him to play me in a game, not because I thought I could beat him. I just want to see, to a seasoned pool player, where I stood, having just like taught myself and practiced myself. And something about that impressed the guy, and we kind of became like he became my mentor in terms of pool. But some lessons he taught me were bigger than pool. And the one that sticks out to me the most is, he told me if I wanted to be better at pool, to read the book Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Now I never heard of it because I was younger, but my parents did, and so I picked it up and I read the book, and the book is only about a seagull. Like, I thought it was gonna be like some pool related book, but it's only about a seagull, and it's about a seagull that wants to be more than just a seagull and wants to fly at the speed of light. That's what Jonathan wants. And Jonathan learns along the way that the only way that he is capable of traveling at that speed is to know that he reached his destination before he even took off, to know that he was going to make it there before he even started to fly, and that's how he could do it. And that lesson was what the man at the pool hall was trying to tell me, that if you to make your shots for pool, you have to know that you made the shot before you even take it. Because if you doubt yourself, then you'll miss the shot, which is true more often than not. And so when I was getting this talk prepared and I was looking up different quotes, I tend to fall down rabbit holes, and I just, the original point that I wanted is way up here, and then by the time I'm branched like lightning and tree roots, and I find myself somewhere that I had no idea I would even end up. And I stumbled upon this American monk named Thomas Merton, and it was very exciting to me because I did, I don't think I knew this guy existed. Some of the stuff that he wrote sounded a little familiar, but he is an American monk that's like a mystic, like a Christian mystic, which is, as anyone that's heard my talks before know, that that's like my thing, like Christian mysticism. So I was like, what? And the man was born in France but grew up on Long Island, which, like, what? Like, that's like crazier to me. And so he was alive from 1915 to 1968, and but he wrote a lot about interfaith understanding, which was even crazier to me because he would write books on Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism, and how Christianity related to them. And so that like blew my mind, because a few talks ago I was saying that I have a theory that Jesus studied Buddhism. So I couldn't believe that I found this monk. And in the same vein of what I was saying, how it's our experiences that show us, like, that lead us to divide things. Thomas wrote, "Every moment and every event of every man's life on earth plants something in his soul." So it's like everything we encounter, everyone we talk to, everyone we learn from, every experience is what starts to guide us. And that's why a fisherman sees fish different than the ocean does, and that's why I see pool balls different than my family does. Um, but the problem with division is it blinds us to the humanity in others, which is what stops us from being able to see ourselves in them. That's what I'm trying to say here is, you're not you, you're everyone else. And um, so again, the band Me Without You has a song in which it's like a child's parable, and it's using the imagery of a garden. And one of the lines they say is, it's silly, it's, personifying these vegetables, and the lettuce is like in love with the eggplant. And but what's pointed out is that we're we're all just like a blank movie screen, and so what we see in each other is just our projections onto you. So I'm a blank screen, and so what you're getting, your perceptions of me, are from your projections onto me, and my projections onto you is how I'll see you. And um, we see this principle a lot nowadays, especially because so much of our um, exchanges are text based, like in chat here, text messages, DMs, emails, posts on social media. So everything is text based. And in his writing, Ernest Hemingway had a principle, his iceberg theory, in which his writing, he felt he only needed to give people the 20% of the iceberg that you can see, and not worry about the 80% of it that you couldn't, because the reader is bringing that with them. Like, they're bringing their bias and their projections with them before they even pick up his book. And so that's why I think social media is, it has some good tendencies, but it really is just like a cesspool. Like, I really can't stand it. But that's what happens is somebody will write a tweet, or somebody will put a caption on um, a a video or a post, and we're reading it with through our current attitude that we have, either just in general or at that person. Have you ever watched a movie while you were really sick, and then you hate the movie forever just because it associates with you, with how miserable you felt at the time? And so that's the danger of divisions, because we're all kind of like blank slates. And so um the stuff that we're dividing each other over is not they're not universal at all. They're all just perceptions or stuff that is taught to us. um the and one um let's see, the but the blindness that our projections cause in us to not be able to truly see the other person as we see ourselves. um, that's that's something that I've been actually witnessing on social media myself. I follow um, I would assume in terms of Instagram, a pretty famous atheist. And she makes some very valid points, and in no way am I offended by the fact that she's an atheist. I think she makes great points, and I think she is a good light for people that are deconstructing and struggling, that they could feel that they're not alone. But I found this weird parallel that seems to be missed by this person and the people that are arguing with her, and that is that both sides of this. So I'm not talking about all atheists. This is pretty specific, but it does have universal principles. That the atheist and the legalistic Christian are both reading the Bible with the same narrow legalistic mindset, except they come to different conclusions for it, if that makes sense. So the um the the atheist is reading the Bible saying, the Bible says this, and it's a contradiction with what it says here. So that's why I don't believe there is a God. Or the Bible here says that, this person went to hell, or this city was destroyed, and any God that would do that, like, I hate that God, they're a jerk. Um, and, the Christian that believes in that stuff in a legalistic way is saying, no, the Bible says this is what happens, this is literal. And they don't kind of see that they're both not leaving any room for the text to not say what they're reading. Like not mean what they're reading, that there is room to play, and maybe there's a mistranslation, or maybe it's just metaphor or a parable, or um just someone's point of view. They're both equally looking at it with the same legalistic point of view, but since they have different um, outcomes from it, they're like dividing each other on it and not seeing their similarities in how they're reading it. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly, but they're both just assuming that word for word in the Bible is literal and what it means. And they're saying the same thing, but they're arguing over it because one believes it and one doesn't. So I don't know if that made sense, but that's kind of a realization that I had that really, hey Trav, that really kind of is what sparked a lot of um, this talk, and what I was carrying in my head for a while leading to this talk. And so the that same American monk, I'm sorry, I had the name written down, but of course but Thomas, excuse me, Thomas Merton is the monk that I was referencing, and he wrote, "Our idea of God tells us more about ourselves than Him," which is very true. Also, if we want a God that Merton, yes, Merton, yes, thank you, Grizzled. So, um, the way that we like, um, yeah, sorry, I literally just finished this this talk before I hopped on, so it's still a little rattled in my brain. But the say if we see the Bible and we see God as being an exclusive, like only through Jesus, like that's saying more about how we thrive on the exclusive aspects of it, and feeling how it makes us feel special more than it tells us about God. And I have a story where I was talking to my friend Aaron, and I was explaining how I'm a bit hesitant when I pray, because I always kind of feel that if I pray for something that I want, that God will withhold it as a way to teach me like a lesson from it. And I was like, I don't know why I have that mindset, why I view God as some like selfish, selfish like child that is playing these games. And he said, with love, but point blank, well, you think that because you're selfish, and so that's how you're seeing God. Like you're only seeing God in the way you would behave. And so I was like, whoa. Like so maybe my friend Aaron read Thomas Merton. I don't know, but that's exactly it. That our idea of the idea we have of God is more telling of us than it is of God. And division only hurts and hinders our growth, our ability to love, our ability to show grace. And um and what I mean by that is, when things are done with the wrong motivation, of course good things can come from it. If a super rich person's making a wealthy donation just for the sake of tax breaks or whatever, like, of course that money does good stuff, even though their intention is not generous. The intention is for their own well-being or financial gain. But good things could come from that. But when it comes to showing love and grace to each other, if we're not doing it for the sake of love, like if we're only loving the people that are lovable and loving the people that we like, then we're not really growing. We're just playing it safe, and we're just like, oh no, I love this person because they're good and they're nice to me and they're friendly and they're my friend, they're not my enemy. Yeah, so of course you're showing love to them and you're feeling love and expressing it, but you're not growing. You're not challenging yourself to love an unlovable person or to love the other. And the and to the ability to see ourselves in someone else is how we can branch that divide and how we can grow in our love and grace. And so this is a story. It's a bit it's a bit embarrassing for me to tell because this happened, close to 20 years ago. And as everybody knows, people learn a lot and grow a lot in 20 years. And so I was at a Christian college surrounded by all the teachings of, conservative Christianity. And even when they were, quote unquote, more liberal in some aspects, it was still as liberal as conservative Christianity could get. And I met this guy named Mark Patrick, but I only knew him as his nickname, which was Sparky. And we hung out like all summer, and it was one of the best summers of my life. And I had this like almost like a special feeling because Sparky was gay, and as like a conservative Christian boy to have like a gay friend felt like exciting. It felt kind of like, oh, look at me, I'm doing something that is like maybe not like that's pretty frowned upon or people don't approve of it. And so I had a great summer and a great friendship, but at first my motivation was not as sincere as it ended. And I had this talk with him where we were like walking through the mall or something like that, the Palisades Mall. And a guy walked past that I felt was an attractive looking guy. And so like I like nudged him. I was like, oh, that guy's good looking, right? What do you think? And he was like, oh no, that he's not really my type. And I literally stopped walking, and he turned and he's like, what? And I was like, it was like embarrassing to me, but like my whole life changed in that exchange, because up until then, not really ever taking time to be close friends with like a homosexual, and I was only going off of other people, what they said and taught about them. It never occurred to me that like he had a type of person that he's attracted to, just how I have a type of girl that I'm attracted to. And the like it was like a bucket of water dumped on me, and in that exchange I like learned that like, oh, like this, how was I blind to this? This is like, we're the same. Like those are just minor details, but like it's just because our experiences are different. Like we're the same. Like I have a type, he has a type, and it just really helped me grow past the point of, oh, like hate the sin, love the sinner, when I just didn't care. Like all of a sudden I just saw my humanity in somebody else, somebody that up to that point I loved very much and spent the whole summer hanging out with, and it was just like so eye-opening to me. And I was focusing a lot in my mind. I couldn't get this imagery out of my mind of tigers. Tigers are big, scary cats. I love cats, and when big giant cats act like domestic small cats, I think it's the greatest thing in the world. So if I see a video of a tiger playing or a cougar like playing and splashing around, I think it's great. But tigers have white spots on the back of their ears, and it's and all tigers have them. So it's not like a cow or a zebra that might have different stripe patterns. All tigers have that. And if you've ever watched the show Alone, or Naked and Alone, those types of survival shows, the people that are trying to survive often make hats that have what look like eyes on the back of the hat because predators sneak up from behind. And so this way, any way the predator is facing them, the predator will think that they're being seen by their prey, and they won't attack. And so it's thought that tigers have the white spots on the back of their ears to ward off any predators that would attack them when they're not looking. And so my first thought is like, who's what's the predator that is going to like attack a tiger? Like who is the tiger protecting themselves from when they're the biggest? They're like the apex predator, right? So what are they protecting themselves from? And then the only thing that makes sense to me is that they are protecting themselves from other tigers, because other tigers would be, aside from man hunting, obviously, humans hunting, but that trait, that evolutionary trait, is not meant for human hunters. That's because that's not what they fear us, but that aspect of their fur pattern has nothing to do with that. So they're protecting themselves from other tigers because other tigers are the only creature that could hurt them in the animal kingdom aside from humans. And so it's kind of like us, right? Like if like we're the ones that hurt each other. And so we're often the ones, when we get self preservation and protecting, we're just protecting ourselves from other people. And um and so if we find ways to grow our humanity and see our humanity in other people, then we'll stop hurting each other because we're not projecting and we're not dividing. So, and all of this comes to a head, I think, because in terms of Christianity and, the church and the teachings of Christianity, so much, if not all, of the division stems from how literal or legalistic someone takes the Bible, right? That's why we have different denominations, and why you have Catholics and Protestants, and then Catholics have Roman Catholics and Greek Orthodox, and Protestants have Baptist, and CMA and Presbyterian and Methodist, and so it's like, again, divisions upon divisions upon divisions upon divisions. And the so I brought up Acts chapter 15, when Paul is, when Peter's talking and kind of laying that idea of no Jew nor Gentile. Um, Thanks, Jenny. No Jew nor Gentile. no slave nor free. So Peter is discussing that. But then Peter talks about how the law of the Old Testament is such a burden, not to them now, but was always a burden, the weight of the law. So in Acts 15:10, Peter says, "So why are you challenging God by burdening the Gentile believers with a yoke that neither we nor our ancestors were able to bear?" So it's not like new believers are struggling with the law. Like Peter's saying, we've always been struggling. Like the yoke, meaning, how farmers, like they put like that wooden, it almost looks like a stockade over a an animal, like to plow or to pull stuff, right? That's a yoke. And he, like Peter's saying that the law of Moses and the law that was required for our salvation, it's not too much for us now. It always was too much for us. That our ancestors struggled just as we're struggling today. There's nothing new about this. And so that really struck me that, um so why are you now challenging God by burdening the Gentile believers with a yoke that neither we nor our ancestors were able to bear? Like that's, I like couldn't believe what I was reading, that it was like that's self-aware, um what Peter was saying. And then Paul obviously has his take on the law, but I found a really interesting thing in Romans, in the letter that Paul wrote to the Romans in chapter 7. Um, Paul's talking about sin, but the way that it's phrased, even though it's not explicitly said, but Paul is talking about sin as if it's like a living thing. And I love that because that's how truly, as I know it sounds weird and I don't even care, but that's how I view depression, that it's a living, like breathing thing that's inside of us that like attacks us. It's not a chemical imbalance or any scientific word for it. Like I if you deal with depression, it's not, it's more than just misfirings in your brain or chemicals. It's something like alive. You could like feel it coming too if you're about to enter an episode. It doesn't just like snap on, like it goes and all of a sudden you start losing interest in things, and or getting obsessed with certain things, cutting people out. Like it's you just you feel it like growing and climbing up. That's how I do. But since this is, I'm saying that we're all the same, I'm saying that you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. um but he so he's talking about sin, and he talks about that the law and the burden of the law. um how does he phrase it? I'm sorry. The law is how we learn of sin. And so it's kind of like the movie Inception. There's that line that says, if I tell you to not think of a pink elephant, what's happening right now is you're thinking of a pink elephant. You can't not think of it because I gave you that thought. I like inserted it. And Jay's friend, Pete Rollins, had this great joke that he told Jay, that how Christians have a ring that they wear, that it makes them think of sex all the time and almost like crave it. And it's a purity ring. It's a ring that they wear to say that they're going to abstain from, sex until marriage, and they're going to remain pure. But every time they see that ring, all they're thinking of is wanting to get laid, right? So that's very much what Paul is saying is happening with the law, is that, it's basically, he's kind of saying like, I never knew what it was like to covet something that my neighbor had until the law put that in my head of don't do that. And it's like, so it's, he kind of like builds this weird, like snake eating its own tail when it comes to the law and sin. Like the law is how people were to abstain from sinning and atone from sinning, but all it was kind of doing was filling their head with this knowledge, which is kind of fitting that with the story, whether it's real or metaphor, of Adam and Eve. They don't eat like the from the tree of good or evil, right? It's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Like, so it's like them learning about it is what makes this. It's all like circular, and like I said, like a snake eating its own tail. Um, but the importance of being free of the law is something that comes up often in the Bible, and there's a great story in again in the book of Acts in chapter 18, in which it actually kind of parallels Jesus and his trial with Pilate, but it's Paul, and people are bringing him to oh, see you, right. Thanks for stopping by. And so in Acts chapter 18, people bring Paul to the ruler, who I believe his name is Gallio, but I don't know if there's any accents or pronunciation. But Gallio, and it very much like with the Pharisees were doing with Jesus with Pilate. The crime was for that Paul was teaching how to worship God in a way that went against their law. Because as you know, Paul was about like believing what Jesus said, that the law was fulfilled, so we didn't need to worry about it anymore. And the leaders at the time were having real struggles with this, because to them it was illegal. And Gallio said, I would listen if you complained about a crime, but this is just questions about words and names. And I was like, wow, they're really like, even this, you know, this person that was outside of the religion was kind of like, what do you're coming to me with, you're arguing over names and words and what they mean. Like, that's not a crime. That's like nothing. What are you bringing this to me for? And so they let him go. So it's that idea of being free from the law, and Paul brings this analogy of the laws that were put in place for women and their husbands, where a woman couldn't leave her husband because the vows of marriage. But if the husband died, then she was no longer had to adhere to those vows. And that was very much like us. Paul said, Jesus came and fulfilled the law. So just as a wife is no longer accountable to the vow she made after her husband dies, since the law is now fulfilled, we are free of that. And that is what Jesus is talking about when he says that his yoke is easy and his burden is light, because the yoke that was crushing everyone and their ancestors is now fulfilled, so it's not crushing anymore. It's easy and it's light. And um and that's very important, because the law was, like I said before, was what was driving people to divide and to judge. And when you free yourself from that, things are easier and lighter. And St. Augustine has this quote that I just love, and it blew me away the first time I read it a few years back, where he says that one of the thieves on the cross asked for forgiveness and was forgiven, but we shouldn't presume that the other one was damned. You know, and it was just kind of saying that the we don't know how this stuff works. We don't know this the way that Jesus operates. We know what is written and what was told to us, but there's still so much that we don't know. And so just because we know for through scripture that one of the thieves was saved, that doesn't mean that grace wasn't extended to the other one. Um, and C.S. Lewis was a big proponent of this, from my understanding. It had an aspect in the Chronicles of Narnia in which, one of the characters was kind of believing a false prophet. And when it came out, that character apologized to Aslan, who is like very much the God slash Jesus figure of the Chronicles. and was saying like I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't know. And Aslan basically says that the that you kept your oath with this false prophet and you followed them like sincerely. And so I know that had you known about me, you would have followed me in that same mindset with that same zeal. So C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity has a line that says, "The Bible says that we know no man can be saved except through Christ. We do not know if only those who know him can be saved through him." So many of these divisions that we are making based on the law and how tight we hold it when it comes to salvation and atonement and everything. It's like dividing us, but we don't know. We have no idea how any of this operates. So why are we using it as a tool to divide? And when I was putting this together, I did have a bit of a stumbling block because when I was researching about, yokes and the law and everything, I came upon a scripture in Second Corinthians where Paul is writing that Christians and non-Christians should not mingle, because that is bringing darkness into the light, and the two cannot contain the be in the same space at the same time. And I was like, I don't agree with that. I don't believe that Christians and non-Christians shouldn't mingle. And then it kind of like occurred to me that without even knowing I was doing it, that I was having a pretty legalistic view on what Paul was saying. And I texted Jay and I was saying that I feel like Paul's letters are used the way we use tweets today, and we kind of use it against them the same way that tweets are used against the people that wrote them 10 years ago. So it's kind of like you know so in Galatians, you say that there's no Jew nor Gentile, no slave nor free, uh, and but back in Second Corinthians, you tweeted that Christians and non-Christians shouldn't be together. So what's the deal? Um, and so I was kind of like, oh, we end up doing that to Paul, and what Jay told me, we talked for a while, and he brought up a lot of good points. But one thing that he told me that again was like, what? Why am I so stupid that I didn't see this? But excuse me. Paul didn't know that he was like writing the Bible when he was writing his letters, right? He was he was writing them for specific reasons. So he was writing specific details to a specific group of people for a specific reason at a specific time. He had no idea that he was needing that people would gather all these up and put them into, add them onto the Torah and come up with the Bible. So he didn't know that he had to somehow write some universal truth that needed to stand for centuries, when it's attacked from every angle, especially at a time in which the world is a lot smaller than he ever could have imagined. The fact that, we could have people across the world watching this at the same time as people on Long Island are watching it. Like Paul would never be able to grasp that. He, the only new places that he could travel to by chariot or boat. And so that's why, like, I found myself almost doing the same thing that I'm talking about not doing, is with that legalistic view. And then so I was like, of course he didn't know that he was writing the Bible. Like, so why we have to have that in our mind when we're reading this stuff, that he very much, if it was him and it wasn't like added on by someone else, which people think that that segment that I was struggling with might have been added on by maybe like Timothy or someone else. But it could have just been the specifics that make it not universal. Like, what if the people of Galatia, of Corinth, I'm sorry, the people of Corinth were not able to like be friends with non-believers because maybe they are so young in their beliefs, and so they're maybe getting like easily led astray or something. And so it was something very specific to that, that people tend to make it like, no, Paul said that we shouldn't mix with non-believers. It's like, oh, it probably has nothing to do with a universal truth, something like showing grace, since Jesus and Peter and Paul both talk about it. That's a universal thing. But this thing, in the letter to Corinth about not mixing, Christians and non-Christians, I don't agree with it. And that is something also that Jay kind of like let me know, that it's okay to disagree with Paul. And because the in Deuteronomy, back when we're talking about the law and things that were a sin and things that were required for salvation, um, it talks about not putting two different animals together on the same yoke, right? That was, um, like a sin. And of course, in a practical sense of farming, that makes a lot of sense. If you put like an ox and a donkey on the same yoke to plow a field, like, it's not going to go well. It's just going to be a wreck. But in terms of a spiritual sense, I feel like that actually is the closest that we could get to learning, um, a truth that is bigger than the God that we know of in our minds. If a liberal and a conservative talk and disagree well and listen to each other and see the humanity in each other, they'll reach a truth that is bigger than the truth that either one of them knew alone. So that's where I disagree with Paul, and I see a lot of merit in, two different animals being on the same yoke, spiritually, of course. And so, kind of to, start to wrap this up, is that the law and, was a heavy weight that they were having to pull. Right, it was a yoke that even our ancestors were struggling with. And so it was kind of like, you know all our progress was made by like just pulling it, and it's so much harder to pull something than it is to push something, right? So we're like trying to pull this thing behind us, this law, this burden, behind us. But then when Jesus came and fulfilled it and said that my yoke is easy and my burden is light, we kind of get into this territory of this imagery that I spoke about, a few talks ago, where when an animal is has that yoke and the harness and everything like that, it looks like it's pulling something, but it's actually the way it's rigged. It's pushing it. It's just pushing it from the front, because to push something is easier than to pull something. And so, we go from pulling this super heavy burden of the law and legalism, which leads us to divide, and it is now rigged on us in such a way that it's easy and it's light, and we're pushing instead of pulling, so we're able to progress further and help others get further. um, and we could do that by seeing the humanity in each other, seeing ourselves in each other. And, you know the and so in order to see the humanity in each other and to show each other grace and love and to grow, I go back again to Jonathan Livingston Seagull, who could only reach his destination when he knew that he reached it before he even started. So if we keep practicing this and focus on the idea that we will be, before we could project onto somebody, that we're going to see the humanity in them. We're going to see ourselves in them. We're going to see the grace that we're going to show them. And like, if we could see that before we even take off, then of course we're going to be able to reach our destination and fly like the speed of light, just like, Jonathan Livingston Seagull and, his pool balls. So that's what I have, for today. I had another little bit that kind of touched on, maybe what we're all kind of feeling with, the Russia and the Ukraine, but it's another, Thomas Merton quote that was kind of saying, if you hate war, um, there's not kind of like there's not too much that we could do about it. So everything that we hate about war, like the stuff that causes war, like the greed and the hatred, um, that we should hate that stuff, but we should hate it in ourselves. We should hate when we see the things that cause war arise in ourselves. And so I thought that was pretty good, but I didn't really have time to develop that process too much. So that is my talk. Sorry if it was a little all over the place, but it was kind of a little bit of a struggle to pull it all together, as my mind was all over the place. But I very much enjoyed it, and I'm glad that I had my wife remind me that to not get stressed out over it because of how much I enjoy doing it, and I really love talking to you guys, and I love diving into my Bible and my annotations, etc., etc. So, everybody, thanks for hanging out. If anybody, I'll stay on maybe a few more minutes. If anyone has any questions or any pushback, I don't know if Steve is in the chat, but if he is, there's I was gonna do a another musical cue for him because I was talking about pool with a capital P that rhymes, from the Music Man. We got trouble with a capital T that rhymes with P that stands for pool. Because in the Music Man, there's a con man and he's trying to con the town, and so he tells them that the arrival of a new pool table is gonna corrupt all them and their kids. But so yes, everyone, thank you for hanging out. If anyone, like I said, if you have any questions or pushback or things you don't agree with, things you do agree with, feel free to mention it. Well, Kelly, I'm glad I was able to help the drive. And thank you for the compliment. Thank you, everyone, for the nice things you say. If I don't, I wish I had the links. But if you go to the Revolution website, we obviously prefer people over money. That goes without saying. So the fact that I just said it is unneeded. But hey, Steve, yes, woo! Oh yeah, with Hugh Jackman. All right, I'm glad that you're there to see it because that was absolutely what I was thinking. He's a what? He's a what? He's a music man, and he sells clarinets to the kids in the town with big trombones and the rat-tat drums. So, yes, but we prefer people over money, but we do have a need for money to keep this going. So anyone, if you could donate, that would be amazing. Um, I still want to try to come up with ways that maybe we could have Jay maybe have classes that people sign up for, or some sort of Patreon that will help with things. But I just need time to think it out and talk it over with Jay. But anyone, if you can donate, that'd be great. But yeah, I'm very excited that Steve's here, my musical counterpoint. But yeah, because I had that other talk called "How Can There Be Any Sin in Sincere?" So big Music Man fan. But all right, so everybody, thank you very much for hanging out. I will have to head out now. So thanks again, and Jay should be back next week with the continuation of Galatians. And all right, thanks again, everybody, and have a good Sunday. Bye.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. To make your 100% tax-deductible donation today, please visit revolutionchurch.com/donate. You can also learn more by clicking the donate section on the website.